Hi everyone, Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And our special guest for August is Harper St. George. Thank you for being here.
Hey, Harper.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yes, we're so
Har-
excited to talk to you about the Lisa Kleypas book we read, Where Dreams Begin, which is obviously an old school fave of Marielle's, and she
Mhm.
ripped us both into reading it. So we are here to talk about it.
I'm still kidding about it. And these two are like, well, there's things. So let's let's talk
I have
about
to
it.
say, I'm surprised I haven't read this one because I feel like I've read pretty much most of hers, but a lot of them are the series, so I guess this is
Right,
more
yeah,
of a
this one was
standalone.
standalone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which was an appeal to me because it was my first one and I was like, I don't want to get like stuck into something, especially if it was like not a first book or something, you know what I mean? And like have
Yeah,
like no context, so it was better to be able to start with one that was on its own for sure.
that's true.
Harper has read a lot of Lisa Kleypas before, and then Megan, you've also read. You've never read any.
Mm-mm.
So, and then I threw you into like a lesser known Kleypas, but I think there's some people in Romancelandia who absolutely love Zachary Bronson.
I loved him too. He was great.
Yeah, he is one of the kind of prototypical. Lisa Kleypas has like some aristocratic heroes, and then she has some heroes that are kind of like working class. She has like a series of like Bow Street runners, and then she has a series with like actors. But but this she also incorporates these like people who like scrappy entrepreneurial came
Right.
from like the ditches of
Came from
society
nothing.
and
Yep.
like built themselves into like rich, very rich. And
Very
this
rich. Yeah.
Zachary Branson is one of the earlier, I think, one of the earlier iterations of this. And I mean, I think from the beginning, I was like, oh, because he was a bare knuckle, like a boxer, which
Hmm.
is what made me think because Harper's written some boxers in her book.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
was like, I want her to read this guy, even though he doesn't box in the book. Well, he
Yep.
does, but not on the
He does. He does actually. Yeah.
and yeah, he's like ruthless, except for Holly Taylor. And also he's big and like brawny. And it's funny because in the book, it's very kind of like I think at one point she asks him because he wants to be like, she's trying to teach him to be more like to fit in with a gentleman. And she's kind of like, is there a way for you to
Be smaller.
like make that less? And he's like, no. I was like, why would you ask that? Stop it.
Why would you want that? Yeah.
But I want to know from somebody who like hasn't read and also somebody who has read Kleypas, like what you thought of them because I read this a long time ago and it imprinted on me, so I can't be trusted with my judgment.
I
Okay.
guess as somebody who's never read Kleypas before, I really liked how he was like a secret softie.
Hmm.
So like he has all these causes that he like champions and he like makes things better in the factories that he owns for his workers, and he tries to act like it's all about his like bottom line, but it's like clearly not. And he really loves his mom and sister. And so even though he's like this big badass who's like a boxer and has like worked his way up in his life, and like he still has this like secret heart of like kindness and softness that he doesn't show to anybody except for his family until he meets her. And even with her, he tries to act, you know, tough all the time, but he's clearly not. And she can see they read each other really well. And I really liked that about them also.
Yeah. He was not my favorite hero of hers. Um, Talking about like the working class work their way up, like nobody's gonna top Rhys Winterborne for me because he's like the epitome of that hero in my mind. And I also liked, oh gosh, what was the guy who owned the hotel? Was his name Henry or
Harry
Harry?
Rutledge.
Harry Rutledge, yeah. And him, I
I
Marielle
like
think
him
loves him
it
too.
too.
I think it depends who you read first, because I feel like
So,
Rhys Winterborne and Bronson and like Zachary Bronson are
well,
not the
I have a
same.
theory.
Okay.
They are like two different types of the working class hero. And
Mhm.
to me, Bronson goes more with Tom Severin,
Okay.
who I think Chasing Cassandra, was that the book
Mhm.
that he was in?
Yeah.
The more ruthless, I'm gonna do what I want, sort of very capitalist type hero. Rhys Winterborne, Harry Rutledge are the same. But to me, the difference is the ruthlessness. Like, I did not like how Bronson was, like, of course, they have to marry an upper class wife. Like, I realize that raises their status, and that's sort of all of them sort of are wanting that. But with, I think it was Severin too, but also definitely Zachary Bronson, he was like, I'm going to be admitted to the best club, and not just any club, but the club that only I think you had to have your grandfather in the club before you could join. So
Yeah.
it's almost like too far of a social climber for me.
Oh,
I
interesting.
like the heroes who are more like, this is who I am, and you either accept me or not, but this is what I'm doing. You
Yeah.
know?
I think Harry Rutledge is more about like he's over there building his hotels. He doesn't like he's not trying to
Yeah.
Exactly.
and Zachary Bronson is, but like the book doesn't seem to expect you to like disregard that because his mom is like, dude, like, can you learn to be
He
happy
not
with
be
what you've
happy.
got?
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
like, I guess not, but it's not until he finally wins Holly over that it's because yeah, his mom is like, you don't need to marry like this
Like you
particular.
don't have
He
to
was
keep
fine.
reaching. Like you can
Yeah.
just be happy with where
I
we've
mean,
got.
I get it's part of his arc, and eventually he comes to that realization, but
Yeah,
I think
he
I
does
just like it
start.
when the heroes have already kind of figured that out. And also, one thing I really liked about this book was his sister. He's
Mhm.
trying to get her married off, and she falls in love with the guy who's totally
No,
not someone, yeah, he's like an architect,
He's not
somebody
a
not
duke.
who
Yeah.
her brother wanted. Like he wanted a duke. But that annoyed me too, like pushing this duke idea
Yeah.
when he himself would not want to marry just anybody, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
So that annoyed me.
Except once she started like courting people, it never really shows him getting into her. Do
Right.
you know
Like
what I mean?
having opinions about the people that were coming around or anything. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was
but
sort of like the idea of it to him more than like actually like doing it once the time came, I guess.
yeah, but
Well,
he
and
did already say
Holly
it.
talked to him about it too, so I feel like because she was there, she was able to temper that a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe so. She did. I think that at the near the end when the sister was like, he's not going to let me get married because he's what being whatever.
Yeah.
But then when Holly talks to him, he's kind of like, oh, that was just a test. Like I wasn't. What do you mean?
Like I was never going to stop them from getting married. Yeah. It's like, well, nobody else knew that, you jerk. Yeah.
Well, he took
Like
it too
everybody else
far
is
too.
miserable.
It's too far. It's just a jerk move a little bit.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and it's like the thing that was interesting to me about that, I think, is that it was like that was how he was before Holly. Like that's something he would have done before her.
Yeah, yeah.
And because he was now after her thinking he was never going to have her again, he was like reverting back to all the worst
Hmm.
things about himself. And that was
Hmm.
like one of those things to me. Whereas
Hmm.
I think if she had been around when that was happening, he would have like acted
Yeah, I
different.
could see that. Yeah.
Like they might have, he might have discussed his concerns, and she might have been like, "Well, here's a different way you could go about it."
Right.
It's
Yeah.
I know that like in when you look at like writing like structures and craft and whatever, there's supposed to be a point in the story where they like, you've done all the things you were like you chose, and then things get difficult and you revert back to like your old, like you go back to what's familiar. But I feel like in this book it's very almost like literal because Holly goes all the way back to living with her in-laws, in a house that like
Her
they've
husband grew
been,
up in.
yeah, and they've been kind of like gross to her before, but but she goes back there anyway. Like, I guess this is where I should be. And he kind of,
Should be. She cares a lot about that.
I know.
and he goes back to like, well, even beyond, like he's worse, like more grumpy and drinking more and doing all that more
Mhm.
than ever before, but also like kind of diving headlong into like whatever he was doing before to try to forget.
Mhm.
I'm curious, for Harper, from a writer standpoint, like, do you, like, how do you vary? Because I mean, I'm assuming that that's a thing that happens often, but not to that degree. I just found that when I read this book, I was like, oh wow, we went all the way back,
Right.
back to the house. How do you try to like fit that in without it maybe being so, um, yeah, literal?
Oh gosh, I have to say, Holly was not my favorite character either. I did enjoy the book overall, but it wasn't my favorite Lisa Kleypas book.
Mhm.
Um, because like Megan was saying, she was too like, I should do this, I should do that. This is how everything is. And again, that's part of her arc. And I did like her in the end. It was just getting there with her. So
Yeah.
that really, I mean, it happened like right after they were intimate.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right
then it was
after.
like a
Yeah.
huge step back. And
And
Mhm.
to
she
me, that
started
was,
it. The thing was that I didn't even remember this until I reread, really, but she was the one who was like, who initiated the
Oh,
intimacy.
yeah, she did. And it's like we talked about in the recap too, Marielle pointed out that, like, she had been telling us a thing this whole time in the book. Both the characters were like, "If this happens, I have to leave." And he was like, "If I do this, then she's gonna leave." Like, and the whole time we were like getting told that. And then we get to that point, and sure enough, like as soon as they have sex, she's like, "Oh no, I have to leave." And you're like, "Come on, man."
you're still surprised. Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing?
I was very much like, no, no.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, it was too much because like you want to see them have grown a little bit. Um, and then they have like a new life, like they take the step back, but it's like, okay, this is the new life, not going back to the complete old way that things
Right.
were, which to me was a little too much. I mean, I can see why she did it though, because where else was she going to go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really would have loved to have seen her then take a little responsibility for herself
Yeah.
It was
and the
interesting
choice she
that she
made.
went back and then was like, oh, I don't like
Yeah.
this actually. But
Yeah,
she was
like
comfy
actually
there
this feels like
before.
an ill-fitting shoe. Like I can't fit back into this spot
Yeah.
anymore now
And
that I
I
know
think
what I
that's
know.
why that happened, so that she could do that. And maybe she wouldn't have done that had she not gone back.
Yeah. But yeah, it was kind of interesting to me to see it so like such a literal like iteration of that, because usually
Back
it's
to where
more
you
of a
started.
like,
Yeah.
you revert to like being afraid of, whatever the thing you were afraid of, and you've been facing it, but now you're like, oh no, I'll run away, or whatever.
Yeah.
But she like went all the way home. Even her daughter was like, what are we doing?
I
I
know.
love it. I love when she's telling Rose they're gonna leave and she's like, "You can go back. I'm staying here." She was
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
she was a good character. I don't always love kids like in romance, but I felt like she really was fun. And like she always said the quiet part out loud, which
Yeah.
you really needed a lot of times because the two of them were like never saying what they really meant out loud, it seemed like. So it
Yeah.
that was nice. I liked that.
Yeah. I liked her and I liked how he was with her. It really let you see that other part of him, like
Yeah.
when he's given her buttons for her button string and he's really thinking of her. So it really lets the soft side of him come out. So I thought that was really good to have her kid in
Even
the book.
before he did his boxing fight, duel, whatever they did,
Yeah,
he
exactly.
he was like, "Ooh,
Rose
I
wants
need
that
that
button.
button,"
Yeah. That
which
two
is
carat
really,
diamond button
I know a girl who
to
needs
give to
that.
a 5-year-old. Yeah. Yeah, it was that was really sweet. I loved how he was with her. And it was just sort of like you could picture like that's how he was with Elizabeth when she was little, and like it was
Mhm,
you understood like that they were so close and all that, and I really like.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really think it was genius to have all the female characters around him
Yeah,
because that did soften him a bit and let you see this other part of him, which if he had just been a single guy with no siblings or no family, I
yeah,
really wouldn't have liked him probably. But we did see that, so it did balance him out. That's why I
yeah,
like the book overall and him overall, but there were just those parts about him I didn't like.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, you have like his mom telling him like you
Yeah.
don't need to, and he's just like,
I
yeah,
mean, I love how everybody they tell him pretty much what they think, even
Mhm.
though he has this big, strong personality.
Yeah.
Nobody's really scared to speak up.
yeah.
Even the staff like in the house, the servants and stuff, they were like living their best life until Holly got there. And
Right,
not
like
like, oh,
barely doing anything. Yeah,
he's like, my house is messed up, but I don't like nobody.
I don't
The
know how to
mom's
fix
not
it.
gonna tell
Yeah,
them. He doesn't know what. It's just, oy. I
yeah.
did want to ask you about the boxing though, Harper. Did you like since you have written like contemporary and historical boxing too?
Yeah.
How like how did you feel about that part of him, of his character? I mean, I feel like he didn't do it for a long time, but
I feel like I would have liked to have seen that more because at this point I'm like, wait a minute, he did do that one thing. So it just wasn't a big part of him.
Yeah,
yeah.
It would have been nice to have seen that more. I think I would have appreciated maybe knowing him sooner than where he was at already in his life.
Mhm.
I don't
Like
know how
like
that
when he
would have
was still on the
happened.
come up instead of being
Yeah,
like fully
exactly.
rich
Mhm.
and everything already. Yeah,
I think it would
yeah,
have
that's
benefited from
interesting.
that because I do feel like I don't know, I felt almost like I didn't know him as much as I wanted to know him,
hmm.
if that makes sense.
Okay,
Yeah, and I'm curious if it's a little bit that like this book was written in like 2000,
2000.
and I think the Wallflowers, like again, the Magic is 2004. And then everything after that, I think she's become less and less like third person omniscient. But in this
Mm,
book, you still have a lot of like she does a lot of describing and a lot of like she goes into people's heads that
A
aren't
lot of head
even like
hopping. Yeah,
that are not the main characters sometimes. Um, and yeah, within the scenes and in the chapters are super long. Like it's I think the book is set up differently than what
very
the
old school. Yeah,
yeah, it does read old school a bit. I do
yeah.
think that kind of hampered it because I felt the same way about her a bit, although less with her. I got into her headspace, I think, quicker than his. Where him, it was like, I think we were halfway through the book before I was really starting to feel like I was in his head a lot.
mm.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I
Um,
wonder if that's because of that narration choice, like you were saying, like the third omniscient, like you're never really in his head, sort of. Not like
Hmm.
if it was first
Hmm.
person or something. You know what I mean? Like you're still only getting like surface level stuff a lot of the time. So it's yeah, you have to like work harder to
Well, even now, yeah, with romance, you see it, even the third person historical, you see it's third person, but it's close. So
mhm.
you're still very much like in their
in
headspace.
there. Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely had a lot to do with the distance, I think, that you felt from the characters.
I will say that in the first third of the book, there's like a lot of setup and a lot of like you being like shown what their dynamic is going to be.
Hmm.
And maybe my very favorite part of that maybe helped me like decide that I liked Zachary Bronson was that when there's a moment where they're like eating together and she says something to him about like how he doesn't have to like do this stuff, that he really should be like being a gentleman means that you are like this way or that way, and he's like, come on, like you're telling me that you've never done anything that's, and she thinks about it and she's like, no, like I'm a little bit
Oh,
vain but
Vane.
not
Yeah.
really. And then and he's like, there's nothing that you, and she's like, well, I like cakes, like if you put like a tray of cakes in front of me. It's real hard for me not to eat them all. And then when they do their first lesson, they bring out like
A plate full
the
of
tea or
cakes.
whatever,
All
and
the
a plate full of
cakes.
and he says to her like, I want to watch you like wrestle with temptation or something. And that was when I was like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
So
I think that's part of what worked for me from the beginning was their like banter.
mhm.
They really like played off each other well and like clearly had fun every time that they were talking to each other, and that made it fun for me too. And so later on when she was just constantly fighting against her feelings for him and stuff, like that seemed like it was a lot less, and I was already mad at her for being dumb, and then that was gone too. So then I was like, okay, come on. We gotta like
He kept like leaving. He was like, I can't be here. Well,
So, because yeah, that their like witty banter was like the best part for me. And so when that started to ebb off, when everything, all the feelings started like taking over, and she was like constantly fighting against her own self, I was like, this is not as fun for me anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I love how she had been in love with George all that time. She still loved him, even though she was a widow. I think 3 years had passed.
Hmm.
And I love that, especially toward the beginning. But then it kind of just kept on. Like, what would
Hmm.
George do? What would George think? Would George want me to do this? And then the friend showed up and he was like, well, George wants you to marry me. And
she's
she's like,
like,
okay.
I can't
I
tell you how
love
many times I said out loud to nobody, George is dead. Do what you want.
well, and Zachary Bronson was like, you're telling me that you're doing like the dumbest thing because some person who's
Because
not even
some dead
here.
person asked you to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but somebody told me once, and this was me, like when I was writing stuff where they said that like sometimes something can be realistic, but it like doesn't serve the story very well. And I felt like with this, like it to me it was realistic that she has George's baby. I mean, she's not a baby anymore, but and so I
Yeah.
feel like her trying to like, and she's been brought up to like always make her decisions based on what like other people require of her. So I could see her still being like, oh, well, am I going to do this? But it did take a very long time for her to get past that, which seemed
It
realistic,
did.
but also
Mhm.
like so frustrating.
But by that part, like George never would have wanted her in a million years to move in with that guy. Like I feel like once she crossed that, it was time to put
She's
George
past
behind
worrying about
her.
that. Yeah,
A
I
little bit, you know.
yeah.
And I
It's
would have
like,
liked to
it's
seen
too
that
late.
taper off more.
Right, like now that you've done this one mega thing that he would have absolutely hated, like then who
Yeah.
cares? Like you're past
But do
that
you
point.
think
Yeah.
she was very like, but we didn't do anything, so it's fine? Because even when he like got into a fight over, she was like, well, we didn't do anything. And now that you like
Right.
did a
Now you made a big
boxing
deal out
match
of
that
it.
made it seem, and it's like,
Yeah.
woman, she did like to like ostrich
Oh
sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and of all the people to do that too, because she grew up in that world, she understands like perception is reality, which means like it doesn't matter if you know that you didn't do anything, everybody else assumes you did, and that's the
Hmm.
narrative now. Like you can't do anything about that. Yeah.
Right. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It just struck me that went on a little too long because of that big, huge decision. If there
Yeah.
was more of a lead up and then she took that decision, you know, I guess I could have bought that a little more, but it just went on too long because of that.
Yeah.
I could see that. I could see where like
And
one scene.
especially when she's out in the garden after her and Ravenhill first are talking about um the thing that they still haven't named, this promise. And he leaves her alone and she's like asking George for a sign. And Zachary comes. It's like, that was your sign, girl. Like, and you read it wrong. Like, you're still thinking about Ravenhill, worried about George. Like, you literally just got your sign and you missed it. Like, what happened? Yeah. So,
I will say that like the first Wallflowers book has a heroine who is also like she needs to get married because like her family is like destitute, like they are having less and less money, and she needs to like marry somebody rich.
Not only
Um,
that, but her mom is putting herself in a very difficult situation. So she's like also saving her mom from having to do that.
mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
and in that book, she also has like this, I mean, it's not nearly to the same degree, but she's very aware of like how it's going to look to society too.
But she can't
And
afford to have her reputation at all because then it's all bets are off.
yeah.
No marriage for her. Her mom's gonna continue to be in this terrible
Oh, and like
situation.
every man in the ballroom is gonna immediately. And I thought about that when Holly goes to that ball, the Plymouth ball,
Mhm.
and she's wearing the red dress, but she's already been living with Zachary Bronson, and she's so confused why all these men are like surrounding her. And I was like, if you had read the first Wallflowers book, you would have known that now they all think that you're like easy
Easy.
peasy. Yeah.
Yeah. Now they
Anyway.
all are not only easy, but like free for the asking. Whereas before she was like still fully in her like widow weeds.
Mhm.
So
And also like had the reputation of like, oh, she loved her husband. She would never. Like
right.
that's what the hostess
Yeah.
told Zachary at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, like don't even think about it. She really loved her husband.
What is that old saying? Butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. Or
Yeah.
something like
Uh-huh.
that. Like that's
Yeah,
how they looked at her
absolutely.
before.
That fits her to a
Yeah.
T for sure.
Then she showed up in that red dress, and they were like, well,
They were like, "Oh, wait a minute. Play it
Things
back."
have changed.
Yeah. So, I guess if you want to talk about what your favorite Kleypas is, you should say that.
Okay, well, it will become it's no secret to anybody that it's Marion Winterborne.
Oh, right. Okay.
So you have to read that one.
Okay.
Although Cold Hearted Rake is the first book, Marion Winterborne is the second book.
Okay.
And I like Cold Hearted Rake too, although a lot of people did not. I think it got mixed reviews. I don't understand it because I love them all. I think some people just didn't like the hero.
Okay.
I could see that.
And
I
so,
mean,
Marielle, is this your favorite, or do you have another favorite Kleypas?
I have a very hard time being like favorite.
I know you don't like to.
This might be like my favorite standalone of the Kleypas books.
Yeah.
And I think I just really enjoyed reading something that was so like different. I also really like again the magic for the
Oh yeah,
same like
I like
that
that
book
one.
has so much like really interesting stuff that I haven't really seen in other books. So she has a whole secondary romance that happens with like the hero's alcoholic and the sister's just like, like there's a lot in there that I love too. Um, of the Wallflower books, I I really like the first one, and I like the other ones too. Like I think it's fun with the sisters and whatever, but love I loved how much Annabelle had to like wrestle with her own upbringing, but her own expectations for her life and her like idea of like what society would look at her for and what was important and whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and when she like finally marries and actually like loves her husband, and people don't believe that she like they think that she married him just for his money. It's I like that book a lot. Of like look at I'm going to talk about this forever. Of the Hathaways, I feel like I like the books that I love. I love Harry Rutledge like with all my heart. But I love Beatrix. So that Love in the Afternoon with the she's so
That's the one
quirky.
with the
And
letters,
with all
right?
the animals.
Yeah.
And it's also has an epistolary, like whole epistolary part in the beginning.
Yeah.
It's so yeah, I have a lot of favorites. And a lot of the old ones I think she did a lot of like interesting things, pairings. I also really like the way that she like puts people in that you're like, wait a minute, I know that name. So it's fun on a reread to like discover that there's people hanging out in the books.
Mhm.
I don't know if I have a favorite because I think I like different ones for different things. Like I think that Love in the Afternoon is like super fun. Like it's so funny, but again, the magic will like make me cry every single time. It's just
It's very much whatever mood you're in.
yeah.
And the one I like, oh gosh, American? Is that the Hathaway
Uh-huh.
series?
That's the Red
Okay, I
Velvet
love that book.
Sunrise
That's
one.
my favorite of the series
See, I
because
think
he's
you
like,
and who else is Kate Claiborne? That's her favorite of them.
because he's like, she's, I can't even describe it. That's the one where she's very sick to start with, right? And he's like, oh no, I can't. I would kill you if I touched you. So he like treats her with kid gloves, and then she comes back and she's better, and she has to basically grab him, and she's like, "You're not gonna hurt me." I don't know. I
She
just
just
haven't seen that
ran.
dynamic in a romance before, and I really liked it.
Yeah, I think that's so funny. I have a issue with any, well, not an issue, but yeah. Like sometimes there's books where the hero will be like, and Lisa Kleypas does this a few times because she does it with Derek Craven. And anyway, where he's like, I can't have her, so I'll just find myself a bunch of ladies that look like her, and I'm like, what? Like I
Can't do
so
it.
that book, I was like, what?
Yeah, no, I can't do
I
that either.
have to say that annoyed me with this book a little bit. Like, I'm totally fine with like, I don't necessarily think it's cheating up to a point, but like once she moved in and he was still going out every night, I was like,
Yeah, I didn't
I
love that
don't like
either.
and then he justifies it like he has needs, you know? I
Yeah.
just didn't like that part of
Except he kept like not going out because
Yeah.
when he finally goes to
Well,
Marlowe's,
after a certain
everyone's like,
point,
we haven't
after
seen
a certain
you.
point.
he decides he likes staying home with her better, but it's not right away. And
But
yeah,
they're
and
like clearly she's been like, we are not together. I'm just
yeah,
here to do a job. And he at
uh-huh.
first was like, I'm gonna seduce her, but then once he liked her, he was like, well,
Not worth
it's
it.
fine. We'll just hang out.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting reading it for the first time like now and seeing things like that and being like, "Oh, I would definitely not be happy with that if that was like in a book that came out last week." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
so it's interesting. But and I mean everybody feels, you know, different ways about that, but me personally like I don't once the hero and heroine are like in each other's orbit, I don't like either of them like being with other people because that's
Yeah,
not
I get
I'm not
that.
here for that. You know what I mean? Like I'm here to see them fall in love. I don't want to see
I
either
don't
of
like
them
it at
other
all
people.
in the book, but I'm like, I get it to a point.
Yeah.
And you're right.
Yeah.
Like once they're circling each other,
Yeah.
then it gets a little bit
Yeah, then it's
icky.
dicey.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel it, but Mary Penn, I don't think in that book, I don't think that they were. I think he was very much like, I can't, I cannot be with you. And
Yeah.
that was, and so, but she came back from France and was like, look,
It's fine.
I think I just maybe like the long suffering hero.
I can see that. That's funny.
You don't get that often.
No,
Would
and
have been cold storage.
do you
Yeah.
know what's funny is that Derek Craven, like in their epilogue, like his wife Sarah, right? Like she has a baby and then she's like real nervous about like resuming like marital relations.
Uh-huh.
And in this book, I thought it was really interesting to have it be the opposite, that she was
Yeah.
sick and now he's like, oh, I'm gonna break her.
Can't touch. Yeah.
Yeah, and also that like the longer it had been, the more he was like, I'm not gonna be able to be gentle and it's gonna be terrible and I don't want to hurt her. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, he built it way up in his
Built it
head.
way up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she had to like set a whole seduction scene, which was hilarious because as she pointed out, like this man is hard to seduce, like since never. How is this possible that this is happening to me now? Like this should not be this hard.
like she finally had good sex, and now he's like, oh.
Yeah, now he's trying to take it away.
Yeah,
She's like,
he's trying
no,
to turn
sir.
into George. It'll be gentle and sweet.
Yeah.
She's
She's like, no, that's not gonna work for me. Yeah, that was funny. So
It
yeah,
almost made the
honestly, I think
sick
that was my
bed part
biggest.
worth it.
Sorry, go
Wait,
ahead.
what?
I was just saying that part almost made the whole sick bed scene
Yeah.
that was like 30 pages. It almost made
Yeah,
it worth
it
it.
was so long. I know,
It was,
honestly, that's really my only big like qualm with this book is that they got married at like 90%, and I was like, oh yay. And then we had this whole other like sojourn through her like sick bed, and I'm like, the trade-off was not worth it to me for like the sick bed moments that you want to see in a romance. Like
yeah,
we had sort
Yeah.
of already seen that when he like tended to her when she had her migraine and stuff. And
Yeah.
so
I
like,
mean, he only went in her room and was like, rubbed her neck. It
yeah,
was,
but like the trade-off for me was
he
not
didn't
enough
suffer.
to see that, like for how much suffering they were doing after they were just finally happy after already suffering a bunch more before that. I was like, no, it's too much. I can't.
I honestly like erased from my memory the whole like
Typhoid thing.
tracing through heaven and like no, the typhoid. I remember that she like
Oh,
went to a thing and got sick, and then he nursed her. He thought she was gonna die, and that he was like, "You better not die," and then she
yeah.
woke up again. I forgot that she like went and had like a picnic with her dead
With her-
husband. That I was like, what?
oh yeah.
My brain completely erased that. So
Well,
in
and I
my
think
heart,
I
it was
think
like 10 pages.
I don't know how necessary that was either because I felt like she had already sort of made peace with him. Like she sort of was talking to him throughout and like thinking about him throughout and like what he would have wanted and what she should do and stuff like that. And like so he was always kind of there. So like I felt like we
True.
already sort of
Mhm.
We
dealt with
said
that.
goodbye
And
to
then we
George.
didn't really need that moment, but
Yeah.
especially when she had to basically die to make it happen. Like I was not here for that.
Megan was a little bit, I will tell you guys a secret that Megan was a little bit traumatized by that death rattle.
What?
Because it
I
was
like we got all the way to the death rattle. Like, was that necessary? I don't need to see that. It was terrible. That was too much for me. I went for I like 90% they got married, like, and Rose literally says, and they lived happily ever after. And I was like, okay, we're good. Like that was
That's the book. That's it.
the end. She did give you an epilogue, and
yes,
it
I
was a
did
fun
get that epilogue
epilogue.
was cute. And of course, yeah, with her seducing him at the end, that was fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was they had to go through a lot for that. And I don't know if it was worth it.
I almost feel like either the typhoid or the whole subplot with her potentially marrying
Yes.
Ravenhill, like
Both
one
was
or
too
the
much.
other.
Fully
Both,
agree.
both was a lot. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Again, though,
it was
that's such
really
a
sad.
old school thing. Like so many other things happening like all the
Because
time throughout.
Yeah.
because that happened in what is it? Dreaming of You, which is
Mhm.
Derek Craven.
Yeah.
Like that book also has a bunch of stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like, and now his ex-girlfriend's gonna kidnap you, and you're like, what? And then it's like she comes back, and it's like, and his like casino's on fire, and like
Right.
everything's
You're
yeah.
like, oh, it's too much.
We're gonna throw everything at this relationship and see what
Yeah.
happens.
Can't survive anything
yeah.
now.
That's the one good thing about the old school books, though. You never really know what could happen next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. So I guess I'll ask you what I ask everybody we talk to, which is what is your favorite trope to read?
Enemies to lovers every time. It's also my favorite to write just because the tension's built in.
Yeah.
I just love that. Because you have the bickering and you have the banter and you have all these reasons to hate each other, but I also like you for some reason.
Yeah. It's cute. It's a thin line between love and hate. That's the I usually ask people about their writing. So if we were a fly on the wall when you were in the middle of like deep into your writing, what would we see?
What would be what?
What would we see?
Do you mean like right now?
No, like if we were watching you write. Yeah.
Like what am I writing
No,
Or
like
what
what would
no,
we
like
see? Like your process? Like where
now?
are you? Where do you sit? What do you do? Like
Oh gosh, it's crazy. So I literally have a lap desk because I cannot sit in the same place every day to write. And so I go to the couch, go to the chair, I go to the dining room table, and then sometimes I go to my desk. But editing is always at my desk because I have a huge screen and I can have all the documents open next to each other.
Nice.
And also I'm pretty chaotic with writing. Not that I write in order, but I never know what I'm doing. I have all kind of notebooks and I'm just writing. I grab literally whatever notebook's around. I try to keep a notebook for a particular story, but I never have it near me. So it's usually spread across 3 different notebooks, and I write, do this later, do this in chapter 5, go back and add this in chapter 1.
And you have
So
to
it's really
find your
chaotic.
notes.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Awesome.
Well,
Thank you so much for doing this. This was super fun.
Thanks for having me. It was good to talk to you guys about books. I feel like
Yeah.
I don't get to talk about books or romance because most of the time the people I'm around, they just kind of look at me like the same when I bring up any history stuff that I just researched.
You always talk to us about romance and
Yes.
history books.
We are here to talk about romance all the time. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
My website, harperstgeorge.com. You can always subscribe to my newsletter. That's where I'm most active. I am on Instagram too, Harper St. George. But I'm taking the summer off from most social media. And the girls just went back to school, and I'm like, I need to get back to it. And I'm like, no, I might just wait till the end of August. It's kind of nice to have a break.
Mm-hmm. And
Same
I mean, I
here.
don't know. I always think of September as being back to school, even though
Yeah.
that's not true
I
in
know.
the South.
It's August 1st here, which is
Yeah.
sad. Well, I think you're a little later, maybe, Megan, but
Yeah, they just started on Monday, so it was the 5th.
yeah.
Yeah, we were August 1st. I went to walk my dog, and
All
there
of
were
us.
like all these little kids with their backpacks. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
it was July yesterday.
I know.
Yeah, right?
It's really too hot to go back to school, I have to say. I don't
Yeah.
know why they don't do like get out in June and go back in September.
Yeah,
It's like the hottest time out there right now.
for sure. Well, thank you, everybody. We hope you loved this sojourn back to the old school with us, and we will see you next month.
See you then.